Hello, everyone. The time for case building is up. We will start the debate extremely soon. Making sure that everyone is here is opening government from Dian Nuswantoro here.
Yes.
Great. Is opening opposition from, is opening opposition from Atma Jaya here?
We're here.
Is closing government from ITB here?
Here.
And last but not least, is Tanjungpura from closing opposition here?
Tanjungpura complete.
All right, panel check-in. Is Matthew Punga here?
I am here.
Right, is Tengku Omar here?
Here.
Great. Okay. I think we're gonna start a bit extremely soon. A couple of notes as per usual. Please state your preferred method of POI so that we do not cross fire and have a POI that was given in a manner in which you do not want. Secondly, please comply with your opponent preferred method of POI. Last but not least, please also not only time yourself but time your opponent, just so that since I will be posting the time in the chat box, but it will be more preferable if you have your own timing and such. Great. With that being said, I would like to start the debate. Everything is ready. Good luck for the Octofinal of NUDC. Prime Minister, here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are loud and clear.
Okay, thanks. My POI preference, just unmute yourself because I will not see the chat box. Wait, let me write it to making sure. All right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Wait. Let me tell you how the condition right now in our world is that religion is always divided into two fandom, right? The first is the one is actually being radical. They are love their religion. They are being blinded with all the fact that coming from the world, and there are also the moderate people, and within which is the people that's actually trying to analyze what is happening in the world, and somehow they link in to religion and etc. But how in this motion that here we want to talk more about this kind of radical people, since they are actually the one that hamper the society with their beliefs, and we believe they are the perfect actor here, right? Because first, there are the radical people who actually try to disbelieve science. For example, right now in this situation of the pandemic of coronavirus, they're actually trying to be blended that coronavirus isn't here, or even if they know that there are effect of coronavirus, they believe that, oh, I don't have to follow the instruction coming from government because God always protect me and etc. This is actually belief that actually appear in the society right now. They are believing with their God there are another person that actually creating all this world, and they are the reason behind it that they want to follow, right? This is what will happen is that they most likely have want to argue that actually the science isn't real anyway, and somehow this kind of mind or even this argumentation is somehow harm other people, like they are trying to pursuing other people that, oh, you don't have to follow the government instruction and so on, right? And the second would be they are somehow hampering the progress of science that needed by the society. I'm very sorry to bring a certain religion in this debate, but I have to, for example, a certain religion that they don't want to receive this kind of vaccine or even the medicine just because it doesn't have any certification coming from their religion institution and etc. So they disbelieve of the fact that actually the science that needed by the society, right? But how, in the end, why this is the interest of the religion to change all this kind of progress that being hampered by their own follower to begin with, right? Because I have two explanations here. The first, the interest of religion of this motion is that within the insight of followers of the religion itself, because the function of religion by the religious people will be how they want to create a society to make a good and balanced living, right? So that's exactly how a religion to teach you how you love each other, or how you love your nature, how you protect the animal or even the plants, right? Also, there are another interest coming from the religion is that they want to gain as much follower as they can, because they think that it is very important to you to know God, yeah, to be your savior or etc. Right? But how in our stance as OG is that what we want as what we think as our ideal world is that when people is actually can balance their life with faith and science, so it will not harm themselves or even harm others, right? And how is actually we integrate it? We want to open discussion in the scientific to challenge the holy book, to relating it to the possible events. For example, how they interpret in the scientific, for example, how you follow your government, because in the holy book, God is actually what's that? Send a message that you have to follow and to respect your government and etc. etc. Right? But why in the end the religious leader will accept the challenge itself, or even the religious people try to accept the challenge? Because nowadays the religious leader is actually become a role model that are being invited in any circumstances, right? For example, like I told you before, if there's an event of the pandemic, there are also a religious leader that in being invited in certain discourse, for example, that how they analyze this kind of pandemic is coming from that and etc. etc. This is the chance that actually they want to open this kind of discussion. And even if and moreover, they are actually want to spread this kind of kindness, of, for example, how they sending the message coming from God. So to respect other people that actually having a different perspective coming from you, that actually you are very relatable, or even you are have different perspective coming from them. That's actually they want to accept the challenge, because some of their followers is actually having this kind of interest to what's that, to know what is their perspective of religious leader, to make a discussion coming from the scientists, for example, right? So that's more likely to for them to receive this kind of challenge. That even if we cannot change perspective coming from the radical people, why this is okay anyway? Because people that actually follow the religion is they are being fulfilled by this kind of suspiciousness coming from their mind, for example, because in the end they cannot answer it by the scientific reason, because actually they are being answer it in the religious space. So actually it is what is that, fulfilling their fulfilling what they need. And also it is also there are a lot of people that actually willing to listen to their religious leader, rather than the radical people how they should behave, for example.
Yeah.
No, they are that's more likely to listen to the religious leader, right? Okay, yes.
How can you make sure people's faith won't be questioned when science might contradict people's beliefs, right?
Okay, this is actually I won't deliver to my next argument, right? Okay, this is this is what coming from preemptive coming from opposition. That opposition might argue that interest of science will be misleading. What is the difference that you fully trust your gut and you have no idea how God is very holy and unreachable? Therefore, what can happen that they could be analyzed within the science, right? We believe there are two. The first, there will be a nuance or discourse that God is actually giving human rationality to analyze how the world works. Is actually, it is being spread in all of the holy books of religion, I guess. So this is the moment that actually they are trying to open up to the certain person that actually having this kind of capability of rationality to analyze the world even better from them. And the second will be you actually want to seek God more by knowing your surrounding, right? That's basically God language, right? How you interpret your God wills to all the people, how your God also can be interpreted through science and etc. That's exactly how you want to maintain your relationship with God even more, because you knowing your God by a situation that happened and also by the scientific. That's all. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for that speech. A reminder for every other team, it will be very encouraged for you to open your camera during your speeches, obviously when it is logistically possible to do so. Just a kind reminder for everyone. To continue the debate, Leader of Opposition, you may begin.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Wait, let me set my timer. Okay, so actually, I wouldn't be able to turn on my camera. Sorry about that. I think my connections wouldn't be able to handle that. Preferred gender pronouns, they them. If you want to apply me, just unmute yourself. I'll write it here in case anyone missed it. All right. Oh, and when you unmute yourself, please tell me the name of your team so I know whether you are opening or closing. Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The goal of religion and the interest of religion is to be able to get as much followers as possible in order for you to be able to spread the words of God, to spread the words of salvation, right? For example, for Buddha, that means your goal is to spread salvation that people will be able to reach nirvana, or if you are Christian, that means it's about being able to reach heaven, for example. So it is reliant on faith. And because Oji never explains why it was the interest of religion, we think their whole goal and their whole case is irrelevant because their goal of making society better or more will want to follow the government is less of a priority because the most interest of religion is to be able to get much followers. Therefore, our arguments will be the one to actually answer the BOP, right? And our stance in here is that on opening opposition, we believe faith and science should be separated. So one clarification, we wouldn't discredit science just because we separate it, right? Well, we simply don't want science to be used as an explanation of our religious teachings. We don't want the integration. For example, of course, we will encourage our believers to want to be vaccinated because logically speaking, it can make you become healthy. But we don't want scientific explanation to be used to explain the existence of God, for example. We believe the two should be separated and parallel. OG, on the other hand, their burden is to explain why people will automatically discredit science just because they believe in God. So one major rebuttal is when OG say that people will not believe in government or doesn't want to follow government's regulation. First, as I've said before, that is irrelevant. But anyway, I will engage. Right? We believe this is untrue anyway. We believe God gives us rational thinking, that everyone have a logical thinking to be able to understand that what kind of things that actually will harm them and what kind of things will save them. So people already have this self-preservation instinct in order to protect themselves. So if they want to bring examples such as vaccine, we believe that people will want to be vaccinated, not only because government encourage it, but because logically speaking, it can save them. And we as humans, we obviously don't want to die. It is instinctive to protect ourselves. Second response, we believe when the two are separated, people will even likely to want to believe in the government, right? Because the function of religion should be personal. It is to each individual's own faith. Instead, when you try to integrate the two, then what will happen is that people feeling like, oh, my government maybe it is comprised of a different religion than me. Therefore, I feel like I don't have to follow what they say because my and it's when it will be very very messy when you try to combine the two. We prefer the two to be just parallel, where the function of religion is just personal to the own person, right? And third response, we believe that faiths only explain the unexplainable, and this is the role of faith. And therefore, when it is remain separated, that's how you make sure that science and faith can fulfill its role, but separately, without trying to combining the two or making it even more confusing to our followers, right? So with that rebuttal out of the way, before that, is there any POI? 1, 2, 3. Okay, no POI. Going to my first argument, I will explain in the interest of religion, right? Is it that is to getting be able to get as much as followers and spread the words of salvation. And why then integrating science and faith actually harms the interest of religion? So to some extent, we have to concede that science contradicts faith. For example, science is all about being able to prove something. It's all about mathematical equation, while faith is all about believing blindly, right? blindly without any proof whatsoever. For example, you not be able to see God and yet you believe in it, or how you have no idea to really prove that what's written in the Bible actually happened, but you believe in it. Like how the making of humans is supposed to be like. From the Bible, they say it's God who make human from soil. From science, you say that it's because the galaxy atoms gather into one, or that we are actually evolution of monkey. So you see how it will discredit the God itself, and it will discredit the religion itself. And teachings or stories cannot be proven either, like how Jesus came back from the dead after 3 days, while science will say it's impossible. And there is no way to translate a religion into the sense of science. It contradicts it. But another layer that that I want to explain is on how religion's interest is actually giving hope to the people, right? And we believe when you try to combine the two, it makes people lose hope, because the world itself can sometimes be unpredictable and random. There are things that happen by science, there are things that happen by faith. Logically speaking, someone who is sick, maybe the doctor said the prognosis is very bad, you cannot be healed. But then the role of religion in here is to give people hope that as long as you believe in God, then you have a chance of actually being able to survive, for example, or that you will die a very, very peaceful death, things like that, or that after losing a loved ones, you are overcome with grief. The belief that your loved ones is already in heaven gives people so much relief, able to let them go. While science will tell you that heaven and hell cannot be proven. So actually, this makes the interest of being able to maintain the followers, making sure that they can be comforted, because the interest of religion is not only to make sure that the people have religions, but how that religions is implemented in their life, how it can give comfort to their believers, right? And my second argument will talk about how this will actually harm the already existing followers, because when there is contradicting arguments, when science says A and religion says B, that's how you can make your people be confronted with all this cognitive dissonance. On how humans are easily swayed, for example, because in order to believe in something fully, despite it having zero evidence, mean that they have to have full faith in it. And that's how you can spread the words of salvation. When there is contradiction, we believe it wouldn't be easy, because when you integrate religion and faith, that means the quality of one another will depend on the other. And when it is contradictory, that's how you confuse your followers even more. So which one is the truth? And we believe, although some of them maybe will choose faith, also some of them will likely to also choose science, right? Therefore, at the very least, in the very base case scenario of OG, we will at least lose 50% of our followers, and that is such a huge numbers. We believe it is very, very against our religion. When you try to integrate the two, you will instead reduce religion into just stories in which that it makes sense, and your followers will just create things that wouldn't make sense. So while we think it will also take away the major thing of religion, in which it's all about faith, and it will turn religion into just stories that don't make sense, and it will ridicule even that our religion, because it feels like doesn't make sense. And for all that reasons, you're proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition, for that speech. To continue the debate, Deputy Prime Minister, you may begin.
Okay. Timer. Okay. I don't have specific gender pronouns. You can refer to me as he or him or whatever. My POI preference is for you to unmute yourself, say it outright. I will see if the time fits. If not, I will delay it for some time and then take you later on. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. We believe that the interest of religion, we can see that it's to simply garner more followers and increase the loyalty of your followers, right? This is exactly one of the core arguments that Jaya is trying to deliver to you by explaining that all of these ridiculous rejections that was given by from the side of religion itself actually makes religion in the end look very ridiculous to a lot of people. For example, like the rejection of the vaccine itself, it makes people had to disbelieve that religion will go to such lengths in order to reject the idea that has been existent for so long, that has very good grounds, etc., etc. Right? So, without further ado, let's explain what does this integration looks like. Right? One, this means that religion is going to appeal by relating religious practices with benefits according to psychology. We're going to effectively try to relate whatever is happening with our religious practices, such as prayers and beliefs to gods, and our lonely times, our reading the Bibles, with how it will be beneficial to your everyday life, in your mental capacity, and whatsoever, right? And secondly, this also opens a discussion or opportunity for we also open discussion opportunity for scientific researchers to challenge the words of our holy books or scriptures, in order to provide everyone a room to be able to discuss and to be able to see why these things happened in the past, which things are actually just imaginations, and which ones actually can make sense. And even if they are in the borderline between those two, why does these things happen? And this, in the end of the day, will lead to people being able to more properly accept the Bible and be able to accept religion for whatever it is, right? There actually already is works done by author in attempt to integrate faith and science, right? For example, such as in the book of Integration of Faith and Science. But notice how this kind of book is very hard to be introduced towards the general public, because the whole idea of religion right now is that we're going to simply ignore all science. We do not want anything to do with science, and this is exactly what is hampering us right now, because we do not allow people to discuss about it, or we do not allow people to link religious practices. It also makes people uncomfortable to relate religious practices to psychology, because they believe that inherently religion is meant for you to establish your connection with God and nothing else, right? To establish your faith with God, right? So it will be very hard for you to recommend these things. I will take you later on. Okay, exactly to my urgency, right? Science development, we think, is very inevitable, and as we see, the awareness of science grows as time goes by, right? It is only a matter of time until people in the end finds out that it is not that good to engage in religion if we keeps on rejecting these ideas, right? And our teachings and our words are only stagnant in whatever is written in the books, right? We cannot. We need to adapt to these things, because otherwise we will be left stone cold as something that is boring and monotonous, right? The willingness to cooperate, quote unquote, cooperate with science will give the narrative of acceptance instead of rejection, right? Rejection is bad exactly because people will more likely distance themselves from religion, right? This is the more likely outcome, since science are made to have grounded basis and fathomable explanations / theories, right? Its manifestations are also beneficial for technology and day-to-day life, right? The more advanced, the more awareness it imposes to people, the more people will know about it, right? Extension to the severity of this harm. Notice how there's hate bandwagoning now. The moment religion rejects a scientific finding, for example, like vaccine, such as Jaya mentioned before, or other things, that is an outright without equivalent science explanation, some progressive people will despise this stance, right? The hate eventually grows to be strong sentiment against religion in general. They try to convince people that joining a religion will make you put that or not knowledgeable or open to the real world, and people are likely to buy these ideas since they have exclusively felt the benefits of science, and rejecting it would mean the inability to be characterized as smart people, or people who are able to follow science, or be able to act as a society that is well knowledge, right, or open. Therefore, it's not strategic to reject science, right? We need to accept the reality that these changes exist, and we are being right? With acceptance, people feel more included and accepted. They have room to challenge religious interpretations, and they feel more included inside the religion. Yes, I'll take you.
I think things such as radicalism and also beliefs is very idea of ideology. Therefore, your idea of giving people that data exists, for example, is not going to change their ideology.
Sorry, you got cut off, or am I cut off?
Just continue.
Okay. Yeah, spreading. On to my next point, right? Spreading religion. This is our biggest mechanism in order to garner followers, right? And how do we make sure that it is better under world of government, right? Under opposition, people will keep the idea of, oh, God is good for your psychology. Oh, I just need to ignore people and live with my religion. And this is the idea that everyone is starting to develop for themselves and not trying to spread the words to other people. And they're also getting scared to spread the words to other people, right? Trying to introduce towards other people, because it is basically you will get rejected by the society because you are contending science, right? In our side, you spread that God is you have the confidence to spread that God is psychological good for you, and that some words of the Bible are actually already very well explained in science, and how it already has been discovered and try to be explained why these things can happen, and these things are more acceptable for a lot of people. So it makes you more comfortable to approach other people and tell them that these things exist, that these discourses exist, and hence if you really want to engage to this conversation and try to provide the data or whatsoever because you love science, then you will be you will be welcome to the religion itself, right? It creates a more peaceful place for both of the sides which don't believe religion and which believes religion, in order to be able to discuss it, right? And why is this actually likely to happen when there's radicals on our side, right? Notice how the leaders of religion actually has a lot of power in order to recommend these things and to be able to normalize these things through their teachings, to be able to give their recommendations and whatsoever, right? Honestly, we don't think that religion has no supreme interest to preserve these overly miraculous or unexplainable events, right? We don't think that this relates to faith whatsoever. What we need to recommend is that there is only, for example, one God, or there is, for example, a connection towards this higher being that is very highly unlikely to be questioned by the world of opposition, and very hard to question by science, because it is a lot of fallacies, right? And this is exactly why you should vote for opening government. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for that speech. To continue the debate, Deputy Leader of Opposition, you may begin.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are loud and clear.
Okay. Give me 1 second. I want to type my POI in the chat. Okay. POI, please to the chat. By all means, do not unmute me unless either me or the judges got disconnected. Preferred gender pronouns is she, they, but just refer to me as Deputy Leader of Opposition. Give me a second to set my timer. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. To fulfill the interest of religion, which is literally the thing that is set in the motion, right? Religion has to be presented in a way where it benefits its followers, right? This is to maintain the followers, prove that our religion is the ideal way, but it is also to get more followers from people who might not have faith to begin with, right? That is why OO's characterization of what interest of religion is the one that makes most sense in the opening debate, right? But the burden that opening government never be able to answer is why it has to make sense, right? We think that followers follow faith because they believe that it is the right way, that it has never made logical sense to begin with, right? If you want to talk about who makes more sense, obviously science with its maths, with its all of its logical explanation will always make sense. Religion itself, maybe to a certain extent, doesn't make sense that there's an almighty being that looks over us, but I think followers are okay with that, right? Gandhi meditating for years didn't make sense. Jesus being tempted with the devil in the desert doesn't make sense. But people doesn't need for it to make sense. People just need to have something that there's something over them that is protecting them. That making sense has never been an urgency for religion to be able to prove. We think that the urgency in government team never makes sense. That is what closing government should have the burden to explain why then it has to make sense in the beginning, right? So because we believe opening government never answered that, right? Two rebuttals towards the government bench, right? First, how opening government says that it's very important because science is very important because the entire case talks about science is developing. That's why religion needs to catch up, right? Two responses towards this. First, how we think that how I think that really they need to explain why religion needs to catch up towards this modern science evolution and everything, because we in fact believe that religion actually reject modernity. How there are people who still live who still hold the Bible and believe that thing that happened over thousands of years ago, and that is what they hold. We do not think modernity is the interest of religion to begin with, right? But second of all, how they never explain why the discussion of science will be beneficial in the first place, right? They only say that, oh, it's something that you must do because it's something you must do because science is forever evolving, but they never explain why then it is in the benefit of the interest of religion, which is the major BOP in today's debate. How there has never been a proper mechanism, how followers might be able to accept the integration if it does happen. We think that they're only talking on a very lower analysis that it has to be done just because it is the duty of religion in this modern world. But we've already proven to you that it is not anyways, right? But the worst case scenario on their side that they have never been answered, that has already been questioned by the leader of opposition. If religion and science question each other, it reaches to a conclusion that does not make sense or contradicts as what LO has told to you, how then religion is able to accept the fact that maybe science makes more sense, or that maybe it's very hard to prove this kind of contradiction is actually something that is legitimate, right? We think that this is the kind of issues that we do not need to deal with, right? That's why on our side we think it's better off separated, and that is why government team's urgency has already fallen down, right? Second rebuttal talks about discourse of science and faith exists, that this is the ideal end goal that the government team has proven onto you, right? We think the prerequisite of a good discourse is that both science and faith goes hand in hand, but we've already proven to you why that is not the case, right? How government bench have never guaranteed the process that a good conclusion can be achieved, right? We think that is never going to be achieved on their side, right? But how in the end it's going to happen is going to be a disagreement that people are actually going to end up questioning each other. The discourse is going to be negative, right? How in status quo we are able to see people who are trying to prove the existence of God by science is the very reason why certain philosophers do not have faith anymore, right? That is something that we believe is not the interest of religion to begin with. We think that the world that we want to clarify is that, sure, to some extent there is a division of things that make sense and things that does not make sense, or is held by faith, by believing on the things unseen. But we think that it's okay that there are sometimes there is scientific explanation to things, but there is also miraculous explanation to things, that how people after stage 5 cancer somehow they can be cured by praying multiple times. We think that is also okay on our side. That is the kind of world we want to defend, right? And that is why we've already proven to you why government's case will never fulfill the religious of interest, and that's why OO still stands the strongest, right? My extension will talk about how individuals better understand their religion on our side. This extension talks about understanding as an interest of religion, how followers want to know more about their God or their gods, how they want to know how the past followers deal with this. What is the right way to do things? Do I have to go Haji in Mecca, or what do I have to land before the Passovers, right? This is what the followers want to be able to achieve, so they can quote unquote do their religion the right way, right? That's why people routinely engage in religious activities every week, right? So the burden in this debate is to be able to explain whether or not combining faith and science is able to achieve better understanding, right? That government has to explain why integrating can achieve better understanding. So two things I will prove, right? First, why faith and science makes things more harder to understand, but second of all, why it has to be better kept separated, right? The first thing I will want to prove is that why that this faith is faith on something that is faith is believing something on the unseen. That's why when science contradicts faith, as what LO said, that is very important, right? There has never been the need for science to actually prove it, right? But then because of that, this doubt makes them this doubt of whether or not faith actually exists makes them be able to clouds their kind of understanding, clouds the way that they have that people are able to understand what is the religion trying to explain, right? The worst case scenario on government batch is that they start to doubt their own religion when the science contradicts the sliver of faith they have. But of course, faith in the unseen has no tangible grasp. We think that science will always outweighs if that is the kind of power meta uses, right? But then we think that that's why we think that if you combine it, it's going to be much better, much far off. But before that, POI from closing.
Yeah, Darwin theory still exists. A lot of scientists that prove Jesus do not walk in water still exist. Why do you think you can solve this?
We think that just because some of it exists, we think all of it being integrated, because that is what government trying to achieve, right? That all of faith and all of science is integrated into one, right? We think that if we integrated all of it into one, that is when this issue starts to come out. Sure, there are some science that can answer faith kind of questions, right? But we think we should let it be like that in the current existing status quo. If we force it more than that, and that is when the kind of negative discourse or negative disagreements on government batch is going to happen. That answers your PR, right? The second thing I'm going to explain why that it is much better better for understanding if it is kept separated. But if it is kept separated, right, that it is better to understand your religion when you have a strong belief that science and science and faith are two completely separate things in the world, right? Sure, scientifically the bricks and cement builds your church, right? But how the Holy Spirit stays within your church and makes it a holy place shouldn't be explained by scientific means. That is held by your faith, right? That this faith is actually enough for the person to believe that this church is a place that they come every Sunday to pray towards their God, right? This makes people understand religion so much more better. This is exclusive in OO, right? That the world consists of faith and science, and that those are two separate things that should never be combined, right? And this is why the interest of religion is only answered in OO. We proudly oppose.
Thank you, Deputy Leader of Opposition, for that speech. To continue the closing half of the debate, Member of Government, you may begin.
Check, am I audible?
Yes, you are loud and clear.
All right, cool. Let me set up my timer first. POI through chat, preferably from opening. Closing also nggak apa-apa sih. Cool. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. This motion is not talk about religious leader. This motion talk about religion, meaning that the interest is also theological reason. And this is what closing government will answer. We'll talk about 3 things. Firstly, scenario of how we get better followers. Secondly, talking about inherent value of theology. Thirdly, also the worst case scenario. But before that, a bit of framing and also what does integration mean? Because I think that opening debate eventually never talk about this and never understand what's integration. 3 things. Firstly, it means higher leverage of controlling science development. It looked like Christianity in Galileo era, where if the development of science is unethical, we can condemn it because we have involvement in it. Currently, there are no leverage because it become a binary. Religion cannot be integrated with science, and you cannot eventually condemn science because it's something that and you cannot criticize each other. Secondly, what empirically proven in science also or Quran. Currently in math, there is a theory of universe that cannot be consistent and true at the same time, in which quite show that even some part of science, there is a large species of unknown that is called by God, which prove we can nitpicky on integration and say that science always develop and always there is a contradiction inside of the science. It's able for us to twist it and say that even religion, for instance, it's even also faith, also try to explain that this thing exists in science, for instance, in this kind of thing. Thirdly, if something that is cannot be measured in science, like maybe Jesus walked on water, for instance, we think that in and of itself, in both sides, it will be questioned anyway. But the difference is that in our side, we can say that sure, it might be something that cannot be proven because human, for instance, we cannot really prove whether or not Jesus is human or not because Jesus currently is not already living, for instance. What we must focus is the science or another faith that can be proven or can be done religion. So it means that you cannot just nitpicky inside opposition and really understand how this Muhammad eventually survived in a long process of starving, for instance, because it cannot be proven because the person does not exist. So we can nitpicky and say that a certain faith can be proven in our side of the house. First thing, how we get better forward engaging toward both opening benches. So I think that become a characterization of the follower. I think first thing, what is the demographic of Nuswantoro that currently have? I think that rising currently that become agnostic and atheist at the same time. Science are far more believable and more practical in nature. Why is that so? Because a lot of young people right now are far more entering science comparatively to religion. You enter formal education, you enter university, that always human is eventually the mistake of God, or God is a mistake of human, for instance. In which quite shows that you are integrated and you are told to believe in science more comparative to the religion. Even because you separate religion and science, for instance, your logical mind always question whether the religion is quite believable for me to trust, for instance, comparative to science that currently exists. This is exactly the Darwin theory that opening opposition want to argue. In your side, Darwin theory still exists, and literally a lot of people believe Darwin theory more because it's far more believable in nature. Proof comparative in our world because there is integration coming from science and religion. We can say, sure, it might be true. Darwin theory might be true, but what God's day, for instance, might be the day that we're talking about. Maybe one day in God is actually a century, for instance, that we understand, for instance, and that ability to criticize require you to integrate faith and science. That science is not the same with the faith that eventually exists. But this is why kind of scenario, especially in Sarah position, a lot of people will go to unbelievable fact about faith and religiosity, which is the delta in this debate. And this is why we ourselves, I think that those who are radical cannot be taught in this way because regardless they still believe in religion anyway. The comparative is that in our world, we get this moderate follower who currently do not really believe in religion because there are no practicalities in it. Secondly, inherent value of integration of science and faith within religion, theological reason. Firstly, what God told you. God told you to establish the world based on the God, utilizing. Since you cannot make a miracle like what God did, for instance, the only way you can do is through science. With faith. Why is that so? Not since God told you to must develop world based on a God requires you to eventually develop the science based on what God thinks is true as well. This is why in our world we can develop science and prevent unethical development like DNA modification, for instances, because this is not the grace that the God eventually give you, for instances. This requires you not to separate. Because if you separate it, the only counterfactual is human morality that inherently subjective time and not based on the religiosity that eventually exists. But secondly, involvement on God in Rome science development and also the war back then in Israeli. We think that in the history Christianity, for instance, exists in the spectrum that God also involved in the development of science of the war, for instance. It in itself shows that there is an involvement of God in every science development back then. It means that it's also within interest of religion to keep on continuing this kind of process back then comparatively. Right now you separate it, meaning that you left out a lot of value coming from this kind of Rome era, where also guide you in terms of science development, also told you what is God thinks is true inside of this science. My third idea about worst case, I take opening opposition.
You say that the past cannot be proven, and yet you also talk about what God says in the past. Don't you think that it contradicts your early statement?
Look, listen, the past cannot be proven, but you need to continue what the past God you to told you, right? So you believe in Bible or not, right? If you believe in Bible, you must develop the Bible and you must use the Bible to eventually access in this kind of work, right? What does it mean? Is that in the past, Muhammad in Quran about spine and artery and vena, for instance, but in the past, not a lot of people understand because there's no science development in it, right? It will leads nicely into my third idea. In the worst case scenario of contradict value, we think the development of you understanding science, of understanding empirically proven, for instance, is also the prerequisite for you to also develop your faith. Contradiction like Darwin theory or those kind of thing will eventually exist regardless, right? But you believe in God that create this kind of world. If the world say otherwise, it might be because you see the religion in the wrong way. It might be because the misinterpretation because of the religious scripture that usually multi-interpretative in nature. This is why there is a lot of Quran verse back then about the science that Muhammad want to claim in current world, about spine, about artery, about vena, for instance, because we do not really understand what Muhammad meant. The science development and integration with faith in it, meaning we also develop our faith based on the science empirically proof that eventually exists. What does it mean? It means that you are far more easier to understand of scientific nature that exists also in this kind of Bible and also exists in this kind of Quran. It means that in the worst case scenario of a contradicting value exists, we say that it's completely fine because it means that it's open up your evaluation to understand that maybe your belief to this interpretation might be wrong. It might be not the most correct manner because religion is inherently something that multi-interpretative. It means that the separation of religion will cut off your ability to really understand whether or not the coming from these verses is really what scientific is really what God meant, for instance, because of your limited understanding of the current world. If you keep on separating it, you will not have the ability to understand that this verse means the scientists proven this stuff, for instance. It means that separation means that your faith is much more stagnant and do not really have the ability to really understand the true meaning from Bible. We're very proud to propose.
Thank you, member of government, for that speech. To continue the debate in the closing half, member of opposition, you may begin.
Test, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
There's no like echoing or something, right?
Nope, loud and clear.
Okay. For POI, please go to chat, and for entrepreneurs, you can call me by my speaker role. I'll begin my speech shortly. Let me erase my papers first. Okay. I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think CG's idea is only about how people are going to be more believable when they are provided with more data and also more scientific reason of why your religion is true, for example, of why some events in your Bible is going to be true, for example. But the problem is what they never explain to you is that the link back on your interest as a religion as well. We don't see any other reason aside from participation and also stronger belief, rather than when we say also that the interest of religion is not only about buy-in participation but also about how are you going to be maintaining your value and also religion integrity. We question the CG about the idea of are you going to stay are you going to change your value as a religion in favor of a more participation, for example. And we don't even see how those new followers will be even more loyal for you, for example, and also how those new followers will gain a better situation for you as well as a religion. Because in the end of the day, your religion is not going to be Islam anymore, for example. Your religion is not going to be Buddhism anymore. It's going to be scientism, where people only think that science is the only way to live, for example. In OG's case, we say that what they lack is how they are going to weigh out the idea of participation over the valuing itself. We say that science development itself is not going to be very inclusive on their side, because even in our side, the idea of personal idea of religion itself still exists. Therefore, even though you are a professor, you still know and you still understand that things such as, for example, like the Big Bang itself exists, but you think that you cannot handle those truths, for example, you still believe that exists because it is personal choice in itself. Yes, CG.
Yeah, religion changed over time, and literally back then, we Catholic believe in a lot of hierarchy that cannot be questioned and questioned. Islam also changed on the belief because of multi-interpretation. Why do you think stagnation is correct?
Because two of them, religion and science itself, is not separate. It's not going to be mutually the same. Those two, are the things that theologically and also scientific idea is something that is also that is very separately is a separate idea. Therefore, you cannot integrate it just because you think science will be the future. We think that in the future itself, where science is going to be more prioritized, it will create a situation where the society will be much more dire and also grim in its future. In that side, and that will be explained in my second argument. Let's talk about my first argument about what is actually the religion's interest in this situation. Let's talk about how are we going to weigh value more and over the participation. Talks about participation, they need to answer about what does the new followers going to bring into your religion, and also how are you going to justify that you are going to lose a lot of loyals as well. The beauty of the belief itself, of the religion itself, is that this is the faith. You don't even need any reason to understand it. You only have to be believe in that idea, and you think that it's very personal to you. For example, you see the personal events that is happening to you. For example, like if you have a dream of meeting Jesus, for example, that's the beauty of religion. You don't need any reason or any data as to explain it. Therefore, this kind of followers are the ones that is going to be loyal to you. When you explain to them that the religion is going to be more into scientific, and there are certain event in Quran, for example, that is not scientifically proven, you are going to lose their belief as well. You are going to lose these loyals. And how are you going to say that these new followers who are going to be much more science based, going to be believing in your religion as well to be more loyal? Because in the end of the day, if there's going to be another religion that can prove them in the better scientific explanation, they are going to go into the religion. Therefore, your participation idea is not going to be better anymore. The idea of value. Second, the idea of value. How are you going to, we say that in you as a religion is how you are going to maintain your value as well. If the goal of OG is going to be if you to cope this religion into not becoming radical, for example, it's not going to happen, because in the idea of radical is the idea of ideological. Therefore, just because you show them a lot of data, they're not going to change their view. If you are going to change their view, you need to emphasize on how they are going to interpret the Bible, how you are going to interpret the Quran, for example. You need to advocate the idea of peace in that religion, and it doesn't have to be explained through science. it needs only to be proven that your gut says not to kill anyone, even though in the Quran it says so, but you interpret it wrongly, for example. That it can happen. It already happening in the current status quo. Therefore, radicalism it's still going to be copped in our situation. Lastly, the idea of integrity. If you want to create integration between science and religion, we say that it's going to be separation of your religion as well. Therefore, there's going to be new secte in your religion, and we don't think that new secte itself is going to be better for you as a religion. You don't want any more rivals in your religion. You don't want your followers to be much more smaller. You don't want your decades and centuries of Roman Catholic Church to be separated because of political conflict between you inside the religion. You don't want your faith to be tarnished just because you favor the future more, and you don't even know how the future will look like in this situation. We are going to be very different from the OO, because we bring the idea of the integrity itself as a new idea, as a new extension, and also how the social perception and how dire the future is if scientism is going to be upheld. Now let's talk about the idea of on the first idea, the development of ideas itself. It's a status quo. A lot of scientists already laugh about the idea of philosophy and also religion. They think that religion and also philosophy is not practical and it's not important, therefore should not be developed at all. You can see how Neil deGrasse Tyson disregard philosophy as something that idiot people only questioning about the existence of yourself, for example. We say that when it comes to people, if the government side of the house succeed in their work, for example, it's going to be creating a situation the same as the Dark Age, where people only regard one idea over others, like how war itself is happening because in the past, because people regard the idea of religion over everything else. We say that in the future it's going to be about the science that is going to be upheld in the future. Therefore, in your situation, personality will be vanished in your situation because people think that it's not practical, it's not scientifically reasonable. Therefore, if you have an autistic children, for example, you're not going to think like it's my God have already given me this, for example, of God giving me test for this life, for example. It's going to be like this children is not going to be beneficial for me. Why should I grow them, for example? Therefore, your situation will only lead to catastrophe, just like how in my background would look like. Thank you.
Thank you, member of OP, for that speech. To close the debate on the government health, I would like to call the government. Here.
Check, am I audible?
Yes, you are loud and clear.
Cool. Let me set everything first. POI, please read through chat. And since this is being live streamed, there are two disclaimers. One, everything in this speech is not a personal belief. And second, there will be certain mentions of certain religions, values, religious leaders, and whatnot. And for example, no intention I will want to offend anyone within that speech. I think that being said, yeah, POI through chat just to make sure everyone remember. Starting in 3, 2, 1. It is true that in opposition, you don't need really analysis to explain God. But in order for them to win this debate, they still need analysis, and that is what's missing coming from opposition bench. I'm going to talk about 3 things in this speech. Firstly, I want to talk about the opening half and why opening half cannot triumph over closing government. Secondly, I want to talk about followers and why that's particularly important in this debate. And lastly, I want to talk about theological reasoning and why that is an exclusive feature from our side of the house. So firstly, on opening house. And wait, Kabobi is not moving in my screen. Is this the same with anyone?
No, I can hear you fine. Continue.
Okay. So yeah, first let's talk about opening house. The first thing I want to point out about opening house is that there is very little characterization or process analysis as to how this integration would happen. Opening government is on one scenario of success. On the other hand, opening opposition assert that everything would be extreme on that side of the house. We explain the mechanism, how this would be integrated, and how it would explain that particular mechanism. We explain 5 important mechanisms. 1, we would show that science is compatible to the things that was said in the holy books. So for instance, we would explain that, like Quran, for example, explain about circulatory system that is good for human beings, or Salat is something that is good for your health, for example. These are the things that it might be compatible within status quo that we already explained on members. Secondly, this scientific process can be framed as to an effort that is done by human beings to show the glory of God, to actually prove how meticulously God works, and to show the miracles that God has been done. 3, even in the absence of scientific proof, this actually strengthens people's faith, because we actually explain that there are things that human beings actually cannot control in the first place, which means that this is something that is the works of God. For example, the absence of scientific proof means that we glorify God even further. But lastly, I think there's also a method in mathematics to prove by contradiction, which is to suggest that if something does not, if you cannot prove that something is true, meaning that the converse is true. And I think that is some way that in which we can prove that God probably exists on our side of the house, dealing with the worst case scenario under the outside of the house. But this also deals largely with the argument about scientism coming from side of closing opposition, right? Because scientism might be prevalent in the world where there is no counterbalance, and also we show that counterbalance exists, and that is how we solve the problem of scientism on closing opposition. Secondly, I think there's a problem of characterization of religion within this debate as a whole, because we don't think that this debate is about religious leaders who want money and power. It's not about followers who want comfortability. This is a debate about the concept, about the value of religion towards humanity as a whole. And if we can argue that this particular formatting of integration would create better humanity and for all involvement of religion towards humanity, we still take this debate. That's why our worst case scenario is also important in this context, because we explained to you that even in the worst case scenario where we cannot prove any religion to be true or to be compatible, that is the point in which humanity realized that probably there's a problem within this concept, there's a problem within this religion. Hence, we look for another and better concept, for example, for us to believe in, rather than being caught into believing into something that actually has no value inherently. That's I think dealing with the worst case coming from opening opposition, we still take this debate. 2 things then, 1 on followers, 2nd on theological reasoning. For that, I'll take opening opposition.
What's the likelihood of people using science to glorify God as opposed to discredit God?
I mean, the likelihood why people would glorify God with science is because they are in the religion. If they believe in that God, I think they would still glorify God anyway. My question is under your side. Why would people believe God if you cannot prove that God exists, or you don't have any relatability to that God, and you believe in abstract concept of God, right? That is the question you never answered in this debate. So let's talk about followers. I think firstly, just to note that hope coming from opening opposition is not an exclusive feature on that side, because I think faith still exists symmetrically on both sides of the house. You can still have hope, but you can also still believe that science, you can prove religion by science. But even then, I think it's actually better under our side to get hope under our side, because a lot of things that you cannot, that previously you just surrender your things to God, for example, bad occurrences and whatnot, might be probably something that you can solve by science. So if the closing opposition says that your baby is defect and whatnot, this might be explained by DNA engineering and whatnot. And these are the things that you can feel closer to, as opposed to believing in a concept of God where you keep constantly blaming God in that context. But we explain more importantly is the nuance of these followers. We give you the context of the world where there is a rise of agnosticism and atheism all around the globe. There are 3 main reasons why this is the case. Firstly, we explain that education results in critical thinker, which constantly questions the truth of certain claims. Second, technological development in the world means that there is an increasing popularity of science and demand for science all over the globe. But lastly, this is the most important thing, because in opposition bench, there's also still challenges to religion and people who question religion by science. People like Darwin, Richard Dawkins in Status Quo, for example. These are all people that still question religion on that side of the house on the basis of science. That's why we explain this particular mechanism of integration is important, because only then we can explain and counter the challenges that is faced by religion in this status quo. Why is this followers impact important? Because we don't think that followers is an a priori good for religion in and of itself, which opening government and opening opposition take for granted, like follower means important. 3 reasons why this is important. Because the counterfactual in the absence of religion morality within science is human morality and ethics, which I think as religion you believe to be false, right? Meaning that you need to have certain leverage within that movement and to ensure that there is certain morality in which the science operate, which means that your morality is going to be apprehending in the particular scenario. But B, this also deals with a lot of the radical clashes and deadlock coming from both sides of the house, because firstly, you increase the amount of moderates under our side of the house, which means there's more criticism towards those behavior. But secondly, radicals becomes minority under our side of the house at the point in which there is more people who are critical, for example, which means their views are no longer legitimate within the scope of the global, within the globe, and etc., which means that their view is not as popular anymore. But lastly, under their side of the house, they polarize these radicals and moderates into different factions, which means that science and like faith become something that is so oppositional that you are in a constant fight with each other, which means that there's, the radicals would even get more radicals because they don't feel they are, included within the common religion of our thought. That is the reason as to why the followers happens better on our side. It's proven to be more important. But lastly, on theological values, which I think was very important, but unfortunately unresponded to by closing opposition. We told you firstly that the involvement of God within science are already proven since the past, hence this is just a continuation of the trend. Second, we also tells you that God wants human beings to adapt to the surrounding and to the conditions that they are. For instance, Christianity, or like Jesus Christ tells people in that time to pay tax to the kings, for example, or Muslims felt that humans should be resilient to the earth and whatnot, right? All these are mechanisms to show to you that religion also wants human beings to adapt, and not the other way, that human beings have to, just constantly following the rigid religion on that side of the house. But lastly, God also tells you to take care of the earth, and only by science you can take care of the real earth. For all those reasons, it is within the interest of religion. I'm very proud to support the motion.
Thank you, government, for that speech. To close the debate in general, I would like to call the opposition whip. You're here.
Check. Am I audible?
Yes, you are loud and clear.
QI goes through chat. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think that the problem in this debate is that all benches trying to manifest the interest of religion into one specific things. That is to say that only to maintain followers. So that it is not exist in a vacuum, right? It is not that the religion always going to have really big followers, but they also need to maintain a specific values that already being inherent since the very first beginning religion being constructed. The moment you still have a lot of values that are coming from the past, means that this is how religion actually built and developed into a very, a very societal construction that could develop humanity, for example. You know that they don't want that separation that happens historically, for example. You know that separation that happens within religions when the value is not being maintained pretty well is something that is also within the interest of the religion in itself. And we say that this is how exactly under our side of house, the CO is the only team that are able to tell you that this value needs to be maintained, but at the same time that in terms of followers, it is still going to be loose anywhere on the both sides, especially with the context have been given by the government side when they talk about people tap into science. But we think that it is always going to be better under our house because we still can pass this value, and there will be people that still going to believe that because of the personal choice and anything. But before that, I'm going to distinguish us with OO when they talk about, it is always going to be contradict with science or anything. Or secondly, you're going to better understand the religion. So that we don't necessarily focus on that, right? In terms of contradiction, even if there is a contradiction that happens, we still think that people would still believe in religion because that's how they could be cope into certain things, for example. They might believe that Big Bang Theory exists, like Professor, for example, but they are able to cope with it because they still keep faith into religion. This is how exactly in terms of contradiction, people are still going to think that, these things work separately and differently. Secondly, in terms of better understand to religion, I think we think that in terms of that, they also need to question whether or not people would go into misinterpretation and whatnot. That under our house, religion is still going to maintain a specific value and also want to have good image, for example. They're still going to impose values that is not going to harm their own their own establishment, for example. Look at how we could see that Catholic Church that has able to having certain development, and also look at religious leaders in another religion that are able to being developed their own ministry. They're developing their interpretation towards the people, and people still believe in that. Therefore, in terms of better understanding, it is still going to be symmetric and something that is not necessarily being that important. So I'm going to address our case into several things. Number one, I'm going to talk about values in religion and integrity as well. And secondly, I'm going to engage in the case of government when I talk about numbers and also talk about development that's becoming the identity of closing government. Let's move on the values idea, because we think that this is something that is slightly exclusive under our house. We told you that there are two things that religion has to maintain, right? Number one is that the value of the religion in itself, and secondly, the integrity of the religion, for example. In terms of value, I've already told you previously that values that still bring, even if it is not that relevant, for example, is value that makes this religion survive. Note that in terms of like historical moment, the moment that separation happens within the Catholic Church, coming over to Protestant that currently exists in the status quo, that's the value that's the thing that we want to avoid, for example. The moment you still have a specific values that actually going to like appreciate people, does not necessarily clear this separation. That is the moment that religion still have the interest to maintain things that the value that they themselves think that this is how people should live, for example. We say that in terms of these values, it is not always going to be extreme, for example. People still have our control on that, for example. It is on the religious interest as well to have this to be manifested in society, so that it is not going to be like very extreme on what OG says, for example. For example, we said that it is also going to affect individual preferences as well, because in terms of coping mechanism that we told you before, it is really important. You might believe into destruction that happened in the science, for example, and you are able to prove that. But the moment that it is something that comes in the religion and your faith, for example, that's the moment you could actually feel that this is how you could actually, live in the present moment. We say this value is what makes people still believe in the religion regardless. So in terms of value, we took this debate, right? And secondly, let's talk about the integrity, yeah? Because it is not only about there will be a separation within the religion, but we think that there's potential separation as well in the future, for example. You know that if you're going to integrate science with faith, for example, there will be a lot of things happen, for example. Because science is diverse. There are a lot of things, like a lot of theories that happens, like what CG said when it developed science, for example. That is the moment when you say that there will be a lot of contradiction happens with the faith and science in the moment. You will see that probably like certain religion believes in the certain values that science has, thus creating people more belief into that. But there will be another religion, for example, going to be built on another religion that is already exists, believe into a certain theories that are more applicable towards other people, for example. What's going to happen is that it will destroy the unity that we want to maintain. The separation that already happened historically will happen in the future as well, because how this science is diverse and it is always going to be developed, for example. Therefore, in terms of this unity and integrity, at best, their side will not going to maintain that. It is going to be best under our house, even if the separation happens. It is still not necessarily based on a lot of diversity that happens in the science, for example. It is still back to your personal own choice, and that's religion will be, for example. The value that you think that the most compatible to you is something that you need to choose over than things that are so diverse, like what governments want to talk about. Second, let's talk about number, right? Because we think that this is something that's not exclusive, because on the both sides, people, number will change anyway. People will reduce because of this kind of things, for example. But when OG said radicality and things like that, it is they need to like contradict with the ideology, for example. You cannot just say that people will believe into vaccine the moment you say that it is something that's scientifically good because it already been integrated, for example. On your side, these radical people could be more radical, for example, trying to say this is not a value that it should maintain, or at the worst case scenario, they will not going to change the value, but still going to impose this, therefore creating more in separation. And in terms of that, people will lose likely going to go into this religion anyway. So therefore, in terms of number, it works on OG. Let's talk about development, because we think this is something that already been brought by CG. When they talk about we're going to like glorify God more if you are unable to prove that with science. I don't know this is how it's going to happen, right? Because under our house, because we think that under their side, when the science cannot prove God to be exist, for example, we would likely to say that going to search in one another, for example. That is the moment you say that if the other religion must be able to actually prove this, or probably lead into scientism in which the faith, because faith is always going to fail under science, for example, that's the moment people are always going to focus on science. This is the exclusive contribution that we told you, because people will not going to have counterbalance, because what in the past, in the dark age, people go over faith and creating a lot of disruption. Right now, people will go into science because science is always top over the faith, and therefore like the others will happen. And we think that in terms of development, it's always going to be worse under CG. So for all these reasons, we think that value still needs to be maintained in terms of integrity. That is the most important thing. Proud to close this debate.
Thank you, Opposition Whip, for that speech. That concludes the Octofinals of NUDC in the specific chamber. I would like to congratulate everyone for finishing the round and suggest everyone to go back to the main hall and to wait for the announcement.